morning, beloved friends, and welcome to the 18th Sunday of the year C and today's edition of Family Highlights by Father Emmanuel and Nazimaka Asogwa. Our theme for this morning is the 4 plagues of the rich fool. By way of introduction, let us begin by acknowledging that we are startled that God Himself called the rich man of today's gospel a fool. Having told us Himself not to call anyone fool in Matthew chapter 5, in fact, He gave the pain of hell as the consequence of calling somebody a fool. So if God Himself called a man a fool, it means and it teaches us that only God has the capacity to call someone a fool. And somehow it gives us a clue as to what foolishness now means. That for someone to be a fool is for someone's life to have come to nothing, to have meant nothing, to have eventually been wasted, to have come to naught. For somebody's meaning and existence of life to have tantamounted to nothing. And since only God can determine whose life is wasted eventually, whose life did not yield anything eventually, I think only God has now the capacity to call a fool. Because as human beings, our knowledge is limited and our judgments are faulted. And since God now has the absolute knowledge and judgment, only God now can say that somebody's life has become so foolish and so wasted. And that's why in the light of today's gospel, God Himself saw this man, this rich man, having known now that the life is coming down to perdition, said he's a fool. It means that to be a fool, it means that you didn't realize the essence of life. You didn't realize the ultimate purpose of life. It means that you eventually lost life in the process of making a living. And so we look at this rich man of today, and we look at the contours of his foolishness, and we look at what we might call from the gospel of today, his plagues, and we're able to identify 4. And we want to examine it this morning so that we can ask God that we do not have any iota of these plagues in us, or we can examine also how much of his foolishness is in our lives and make amends. We're able to identify only 4 aspects. Let's enumerate them. Number 1, the first plague of this rich man is that he had no name. He had no name. The gospel did not tell us his name, and it is pretty much alike with other instances of negative richness in the gospel. We see the rich man with Lazarus in Luke chapter 16. We saw that Lazarus' name was mentioned, but the rich man's name was not mentioned. We see the rich young man that came for a quest in Matthew chapter 19. We saw the man that came with enthusiasm and left depressed. His name also was not mentioned. And so in today's gospel also, we see another rich man whose name was not mentioned. He had no name. What does it teach us? Number 1, it teaches us that it could be any of us. Any of us can willingly and fittingly assume the position of that rich man. So their name is given because anybody can assume that name. Number 2, it teaches us that this man did not fulfill the divine mandate of his life. Names are often figurative expressions of God's divine outline for somebody's life. That's why in the gospel, when God calls you, He gives you a name. We see Abraham, we see Isaac, we see Jacob, we see John, for example. We see Peter. All these people that God gives them. So names now will become the immediate figurative design of the person's mandate in life. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11 says, God has a plan for you. And so when you eventually do not live up that plan, you didn't even have your name. You didn't have your name in life. You didn't make a name in life. You didn't live out the name that God had given you. In fact, you eventually lived up the agenda of the devil, no longer the agenda of God. So this man didn't live out his agenda. And then most importantly, number 3 dimension of why he doesn't have name is that he didn't have any investment. He didn't make any footprints. He didn't make a name for himself before God and before man. To have a name is to have been able to create impact. To have a name is to have been able to have something you have done for which you can be remembered. In Igbo we sing, Ihe ji echeta mmadụ bụ ọlụ, 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 ọlụ onye nwe anyị ọlụ, Baby, ebi ihe eji echeta mmadụ bọọlụ ụmụ nwanne m anyị enweghị ntụkwasị obi n'ụwa ihe eji echeta mmadụ bọọlụ. So to have no name is actually to have been able to not make impact. With the health that you have, with the wealth that you have, with the talent that you have, you're not able to make any name for yourself in heaven or name before people. He had no name. Myself and you listening, have you a name? Are you making a name for yourself in this world? Knowing that, as the first reading of today tells us, life is vanity. Have you made a name for which you can be remembered? Is your name written in the book of life? Number 2, the rich man of today had no claim, no true claim. He had no name, he had no true claim. He had no true claim because he had seen life from the wrong perspective. In fact, his own experience and understanding and measure of life is from the perspective of the bigness of his barn. And so at the end of the day, he did not eventually have any true claim to true security. He needed to build fences around his barn because he was afraid. He had no true claim to any true friendships and relationships. Nothing. Because you see in all of the things that he said in the gospel, it was only about I. Look at how many eyes that were in that gospel. I will build my barn. I will fence my barn. I will do this. I will do this. It is about mine. I will now say to my soul. Everything is personal pronouns, selfish pronouns, aggressive pronouns. He had no true claim to life because life was all about him. And at the end of the day, he had no true claim to security. He had no true claim to friendship. He had no true claim to relationship. He had not even a true claim to wisdom. Because the responsorial psalm of today tells us that it is only when we realize the shortness of our lives that we have gained the wisdom of heart. And so because he didn't realize the shortness of his life, in the words of our responsorial psalm, he had no claim to true wisdom. He had no claim to even a sure hope after here. As the second reading of today tells us. Because he had no claim to that sure hope, he had no claim to anything. At the end of the day, just like the gospel said, he had lost everything. Because the gospel of today, the defining remark of Jesus in the gospel is, what will it now benefit you if you have now gained everything and lost the soul? He had eventually lost everything. He was truly a very poor man. What about me? What about you? What claims do you really have? What claims are you really making of life? What true claims are you making of the things that eventually last, the things that perjure in life? Look at this, the second reading of today. It tells us about vanity, how illusory the things of this world are. So many of us who eventually tether our lives, testicles around this earth, discover at the end of the day that we have lost everything. Number 3, the rich man of today had no Christ. So we could say he had no gain. He had no Christ, he had no God. And from the perspective of the second reading of today, to have Christ is to have everything. The second reading, and that's where we find a connection in the reading. Second reading today says to have Christ is to have everything, both here and hereafter. There is no mention of any avid relationship between this man and his God. And it's a great message for us because the only key to true meaningful existence is an avid and viable relationship with God through Christ. Second reading of today gives a detailed explanation of this, that when we have Christ, we begin to live true meaning. We begin to live the true meaning of life. And there are so many Christians who do not have this real impact, intimacy and contact with Christ. I've always said that to be a Christian and there is no Christ in you, remove that Christ from that word Christian and what remains is IAN. And IAN means I am nothing. This rich man didn't have Christ. And so because he didn't have Christ, there was not even a serious meaning of life here and life after here. His life was empty because to really live without Christ is to have really died, lived for nothing, died for nothing. Do you have Christ in life? Can you really say that there is a sincere relationship between you and God, which is the key to a future life, which is the key to a meaningful life, which is the key to a happy and a healthy life? Do you have Christ? To have Christ indeed is to have gain. He had no Christ, he had no gain. And finally, number 4, the rich man of today had no hope, he had no bane. He had no hope because his entire life consisted in this world. He had no hope because he could not see beyond the limited brackets of this world. This is the situation of so many rich people who are so conceited in this world, who are not planning beyond this world. Because of the pleasures and the alluringness of the riches of this world, it makes it so difficult for them to think beyond the imagined confines and brackets of this entire existence. So they want to settle down here. They want to be entangled here. It is the tragedy of so many people who are possessed by their possessions, who are owned by what they own. And many people are in this category. In this Jubilee year of hope, when we are talking about hope of the next world, these people do not find anything to hope for because the entire hopes are concealed in this world. It is this hope unto the next world, this hope that Christ provides us by his death, that makes us continue to look up to something, knowing that this world is not our homeland, as the first reading of today tells us, knowing that we are walking to, and this hope that we keep that is before us gives us the grace to endure through the vicissitudes, the storms and gales of this life, the burdens, the pains and the sufferings of this life. But because some of these rich people, some of those who are so conceited by what they have, do not want to think beyond this world, so they are completely ensnared by, and they are ensnared by their greed. The readings of today tells us that the greed is a kind of worship of false God because it has a way of ensnaring us completely. I watched a Facebook clip where somebody was trying to bring something from a cash machine and continually bringing, he will put something and then money will come out. At a stage, he even put himself, and at the end of the day, when he put himself, the cash machine closed up and then he was there. That's how greed engulfs us. We know the story of Alexander the Great, who didn't think about the next world all through his life, until the point of his death, when eventually it became clear to him he was going to exit this world. And we know the 3 things that Alexander the Great did, because he was completely fallen at that particular time, when he had realized that he must leave this earth. And so he called his elders, he called his generals, army generals, and asked them to do 3 things for him. He asked them, first of all, to put his gold along the way while he was going to be buried. Number 2, to create an opening in the coffin and bring out his hands in the coffin. And then number 3, to get the best doctors who treated him to carry his corpse to the grave. And when he was asked why, he said that he wanted everybody, by taking the best doctors to carry his grave, to know that he could not secure his life, even with the access he had of the best medical care. When your time is up, your time is up. Number 2, the gold to be put on the ground to tell us that the end of all good, all material things in this earthly existence doesn't transcend the imagined confines of this world. Number 3, to open his hands from the coffin to show the entire world that he came to life naked and he was going back naked. No matter how you love this world, you cannot secure your life here. You cannot put your earthly existence beyond this life, unless you have, while still on life, through your virtue, through your impact in people's life, made a name, made a heritage, made a treasury for yourself in the next life. This rich man of today teaches us, because it could have been us. He had no name, he had no claim, he had no gain, he had no bane. What about you? What about me? What have you? Because these things that this man didn't really have are actually the real factors of poverty. And so many of us are indeed poor, even when we think we have money. So many people, it's been said that so many people are so poor that the only thing that they have is money. This is the situation with the rich man of today, and this is the situation of so many of us today. May God give us the grace to see these nuances of foolishness in our lives and address it while still there is time, so that God does not call us foolish at the end of our earthly existence. This is my prayer for myself, and this is my prayer for you, even as I bless you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you. Thank you. Keep praying for me, and keep subscribing and sharing. Bye.